everybody to the Tarmac Green Procurement session. My name is Emma Hines and I'm the Senior Manager for Sustainable Construction at Tarmac. I am joined today by Martin Duffy, who is the Chief Executive of the Local Council Roads Innovation Group. I'm also joined by Sanyalax Morrison, who is the Net Zero Commercial Procurement Lead for National Highways, and also Alex Dinsdale, who is the Commercial Policy Lead at the Department for Transport. But we're here today to discuss what the sector needs to do collectively to encourage the uptake of lower carbon whole life solutions. Given the enormous pressure we're all under to reduce the carbon footprint of our industry and the anticipated wide range of more sustainable, innovative materials and processes that are likely to be developed, we're going to discuss as a panel what we can be doing now, or really at least plan to do, with procurement processes that will allow clients and contractors to embrace such innovations quickly and enjoy the benefits. So my first question to the panel is, just wondering, Martin, if you could talk the audience through your current procurement process and whether it already acknowledges sustainability challenges?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, within LCRIG, we're an organisation that exists purely for our members. So all of our processes are built up around our three pillars that we have within our business, which is about driving innovation, driving collaboration, and the net zero agenda. So literally everything we do is focused on the above, as we drive a need to continue to make the case for local roads. So that's what the business strapline is about within LCRIG. So on the sustainability front, some of the initiatives that we're pushing that will impact hopefully on subsequent future procurements. First of all, we've launched a series of webinars in conjunction with the private sector. This series of webinars is focused purely on achieving net zero. So in these webinars, we're going to explore things like what it is, why does it matter, what's the role of central government, what's currently being done within our sector, what's being done within other sectors, and now indeed the strength of LCRIG is about how we can pull together the whole community to make this journey faster and better. We're also promoting sustainable products, I'd say, on a daily basis almost through LCRIG. We have an innovations board within LCRIG, and we have many SMEs approach us on a regular basis who want to come and show us their latest innovations in the hope that we recognise that there's value in those innovations, that they are sustainable, and that we will promote them to our very wide local authority membership. So that's another series of initiatives, I suppose, that we continue to push all the time. You may remember that we introduced an innovation fund just last year, which was the LCRIG Steve Berry Think Exceptional Innovation Fund, where WJ kindly put up £150,000 by way of a fund, which we've allocated out now to a number of organisations, all of whom are developing more sustainable products and solutions for the highways sector. So again, pushing hard on that front. Now, when it comes to procurement itself, we've just formed a brand new industry panel who is going to help us design and implement a national dynamic purchasing system, a DPS. I'm sure many of you and the listeners will have come across these DPSs. We're not doing it just as LCRIG in isolation, despite the fact it's likely to be branded as the LCRIG DPS, but it has the senior leadership from organisations like ATSI, from ADEPT, from the RSTA, from SEEKA, and from LG Tag, plus other lead individuals from local government. So I'd say claim we're doing a lot on this front.
That's fantastic, Martin, and it's really great to hear about that collaboration with the different organisations. Sanyala, in terms of national highways and procurement, could you detail some of the areas that they're already working in?
Yeah, I think if I start off with at national highways level, then we recognise that carbon is extremely important. So we're driving this at organisation level. So recently we created a new division, and I'm sure many of you will heard of Steve Elderkin, who heading up that division. So we will bring together environmental teams, the new carbon team into one central division, because it's need to drive from the central, and getting away from just delivering things in silo or at projects program level, and raising the profile. I think it's important that we're raising the profile of the environment within organization, and creating additional capability and capacity, and also from the process perspective, any investment decision going forward will require carbon reduction input. People need to show how it's going to achieve the carbon zero before we make any investment decision. From a commercial procurement perspective, we fully embedded sustainable procurement principle into our current procurement processes and contract. And I think it had been like that before I even joined National Highways. Our assessment criteria look beyond just cost, not just about lowest cost. We're looking at value. And within that, the quality side of things will include sustainability. A lot of engagement at the tender stage, asking the right question, allowing the supply chain to really showcase their strengths, capability, and their flexibility, innovation that meet with the target and direction that we want to go into. We also recognized, similar to what Martin just said around collaboration, that we can't do this alone. We need to work with our supply chain partners and stakeholders. So collaboration is key to achieve the carbon zero as a sector. In category management, so the area that I am responsible for, as an example, we are currently co-develop product roadmaps for plants, steel, cement, asphalt, logistics, and trees. So we will have that roadmap by the end of 2022, and this roadmap will be shared across the sector. We'll share with the FT, HS2 Network Rail, because ultimately it should be one roadmap. We all using similar materials, and this process is by engaging with our supply chain. So this is not National Highways coming up with this roadmap. Is through that engagement with our supply chain governance body and the light of HS2 and Network Rails.
Fantastic, Sanyala. Yeah, Tarmac, myself included, are involved with the sector improvement programs, and I've been involved with the cement and asphalt work. So yeah, that's fantastic to mention that. Alex, from a Department of Transport perspective, can you talk the audience through your current procurement processes and whether they acknowledge sustainability challenges?
Yeah, so net zero is an ever more pressing consideration for us. It's something that ministers are increasingly talking about coming down to us. In the last 6 months or so, from central government, we've seen all sorts of new initiatives and strategies coming out around net zero, from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategies net zero strategy, which is kind of the flagship strategy, all the way down to stuff more focused on procurement, like Procurement Policy Note 0621, the carbon reduction plans measure, which I'm sure a lot of your audience will be familiar with. In terms of in DFT, we're in the middle of developing our commercial strategy for the next 5 years, and a huge emphasis on that is going to be on net zero. And I think what we want to do is move away from the idea of green and sustainable procurement as just being about how we buy sustainably, and also have it be about how we're using kind of the lever of our significant buying power as a central government department to kind of influence the supply chain and get more and more people thinking about net zero. A lot of it's happening anyway, but how can we kind of increase that? The context, so I should say, if you're not familiar with DFT itself doesn't procure or deliver a huge amount of infrastructure. That's mainly done by colleagues such as Sanyala in our arm's length bodies like Highways, Network Rail, HS2. What we're more focused on in the central department is kind of setting that direction and possibly shaping the market in any influences we can. I think the major areas we want to go down, and at the moment it's not fully sketched out to a whole roadmap, is a kind of a focus on construction reform where we can, and how can we get people in the construction sector thinking about decarbonisation. A focus on innovation and collaboration, as I think is kind of implicit in the whole idea of this event, is that to get to where we need to be on net zero, we are going to have to collaborate as a whole sector and come up with new and innovative ways of doing this. Obviously, linked to innovation, there's a focus on kind of outputs and moving much more towards an output-based approach and outcome-based specifications and things like that. And then we are taking a more and more focus on kind of category management, particularly around steel, concrete, and cement. And like Sanyala was saying, you know, we are kind of we're all buying these things, we're all doing it together. A lot of what we're trying to do is correlate and corral our different arms like bodies to think about how we can kind of manage demand and make sure the kind of market capacity is there for these lower carbon materials.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex. One thing we've seen recently is the government has started to look at the role of demand side measures and they've just had a recent call for evidence, and that's to assist in increasing the uptake of lower carbon options. I'm really interested to hear from you on the thoughts on what role you believe government policy and public procurement have in those demand side measures, and also what guidance or targets your organisation are currently giving to teams to facilitate that green procurement.
So just in respect of the green procurement agenda, I think this will form a substantial part of what I mentioned earlier, which is this dynamic procurement dynamic purchasing system that we're going to be pressing ahead with. So we'll be procuring that ourselves through the local council roads innovation group, because we know that local government really often likes to see others test the water first. So rather than we producing guidance documents around green procurement that could potentially sit on a shelf somewhere in an office and gather a bit of dust, we thought we'd try and lead from the front by demonstrating how to achieve green procurement through the development of this dynamic procurement purchasing system. I think we also, as an industry, really need to think long and hard about it's not just the procurement element, it's about our operational delivery processes that we have in place as well. And I think that we've got to shake off some of these old rags that we've been wearing for far too long, to be quite honest. By that, I mean, to some extent, we're a little bit stuck in our ways. For a moment, just come and dream with me that a fact is that winter service, when we design a winter service as part of a term maintenance operation, we use that as the metric to determine the size of the workforce for the delivery of the rest of the whole and maintenance function. So if highways maintenance requires 80 people, we've got to find work for 80 people between the months of March and September. So we send them out on the network, they undertake their interventions, etc., etc. I'm a firm believer that if we found an alternative mechanism for keeping our roads free from snow and ice, this will allow us total freedom over a rethink over the rest of that entire service, which I'm 100% convinced will be far more sustainable than our current operational delivery mechanisms that we have in place.
Thanks, Martin. I think that's really important, and that focus at that higher level and thinking about it from that different perspective is increasingly important, and understanding how all the different bits of that supply chain fit together to enable those services and changes to happen. Alex, did you have anything to add to Martin?
The obvious answer is that we're trying to shape the direction, trying to be an example setter in one way, and again, bring the views together of industry and experts within government to set a kind of common goal. The most obvious way we've been doing that is the Construction Playbook, which was published in December, and there's currently work underway on an update to that. Obviously, with the focus in there on off-site manufacturing, modern methods of construction, whole life carbon assessment, all things that we're going to need to reach net zero. I think another good example is the PPN 0621, which I spoke about before, which is at the moment, it's more designed around kind of getting suppliers when bidding for government work to think and really consider what carbon initiatives they can undertake, rather than being a sort of firm assessment or anything that's contractualized at the moment. But I think that's a good example of where we're kind of challenging the supply chain and industry in general, if they want to interact with government, to really get thinking about their carbon initiatives. In general, in terms of what we're doing in terms of giving guidance, we've done a lot of work in our team and in our department to think about how we can foster a more collaborative and innovative environment for when delivering some of these stuff. We've thought about how we can make intellectual property regimes less restrictive, moving away from an emphasis just on Crown ownership to more collaborative models. Thinking about, I mean, the construction playbook, it's got a lot in there about risk allocation and about not just making sure that suppliers take all the risk, that it's a shared thing. I could talk a lot about innovation. I might talk about that in a further question, but yeah.
Thank you, Alex. And I'm really pleased you mentioned whole life carbon. It's certainly an approach that Tarmac are very keen and to make sure that it's focused on that level to allow designers really to optimize designs rather than be tied down to specific product carbon targets, and also so that the focus isn't just on embodied carbon, but it's actually on that whole life package and asset management perspective. And I guess that leads me really back to you, Sanyala, in terms of national highways and you know what you're currently up to in helping procurement teams to facilitate that greener procurement.
I think the first and foremost is we set a really clear target, you know, what we want to achieve. And I think that's key for the supply chain, because, you know, you wouldn't know what you want to do if the client, not clear in terms of what is it that we want to achieve. So our plan is really to enable the transport decarbonisation plans, and we have a clear objective, corporate emission by 2030, net zero for our construction and maintenance emission by 2040, and net zero for road user emission by 2050. And I think what that means is it's giving a supply chain to start planning, from the procurement role. And of course, I would say this because I'm from procurement, we play a big role. We can make this happen because it's that engagement. We have that, relationship with our stakeholder, but also with our supply chain. We have this target. How can we make it happen? And from procurement perspective, is providing that demand and pipeline is really clear. And Emma, if you join us on the engagement call, every month Malcolm will always talk about demand, and we try to get better and better. And I agree with Alex, we do work with DFT and the like of HS2 and Network Rail, because I think as a sector we've got such a huge the investment that we can set that pipeline so that our supplier in our sector can look at, okay, where they need to invest. How are they going to help us delivering our target is by us providing that demand and a clear pipeline, and majority of our projects are long term. They're not short term, a long term pipeline. So of course you want to invest in this area. If I use for pavement as an example, we have a vision that we will inform our roadmap to deliver net zero, which including deploying the warm mixed asphalt. And again, we change that together as an industry. We want to increase the use of recycled material for surfacing as an example. So, a lot of this we're doing, we can drive, from procurement. So from my perspective, play quite a big role in this.
Definitely, and I think that, as you say, it's giving that surety to manufacturers and suppliers of those targets. And I've certainly found now that the roadmaps are in place for so many different government and department organisations, it really does help manufacturers to plan in more detail and be able to make those financial investments that is needed to get us all to net zero. I'd like to come back to Alex, if that's okay, because you mentioned whole life, and that really was one of my next questions, is really what your view is on taking a whole life approach and allowing designers to optimize designs rather than being tied down by those specific targets.
Yeah, I would say absolutely that's the direction we want to go in, really. I mean, that's the emphasis that's in the construction playbook. We're very focused in DFT and embedding the construction playbook. Whole life carbon and whole life carbon cost assessments are now becoming more and more of a thing in terms of our own, similar to what Sanyala said again, in terms of our investment and decision committees now. Before that can get approved for things to go through various business case stages, whole life carbon needs to be assessed. Suppliers, more and more in projects, it's obviously a bit of a phase thing when industry is ready to do it, but are needing to present whole life carbon assessments as part of their bids using the PAS 2080 system. So in DFT, PAS 2080 is what the road we are going down. Obviously, there are different systems which some different government departments use, but I would say it's music to my ears the way you're saying we are definitely going down the road of more outcome-based solutions, less prescriptive thing. Obviously, there needs to be some level of clearly defined measurement of what we're trying to get to at the end of that outcome. It's not all just completely nebulous, but that's definitely the direction that we want to go in.
Fantastic. And Martin, from your perspective with the local authorities, that asset management side of things and the whole life carbon, I guess, is incredibly important.
Yeah, I'm almost a big fan, Emma, of ripping up the rule book, I'm afraid, when it comes to, constraining our contractors, our consultants, our designers, our SMEs. In the role I've got, this leadership role with LCRIG, I've probably met over 100 different organisations, all of whom are trying to break the mould. So by constraining a designer to a particular material or a product, simply because I've got a capman in place or because I've got a specification, I'm going to say, you know what, it's madness in a sense. It's madness in a sense. Because what's that going to do? It's only got to do one of two things, which is either slow up innovation or prevent it from happening in the very first instance. Because everyone's doing absolutely the same thing, following the specification. So designers, in my book, are key to achieving that balance between cost, carbon, longevity, and their role is critical in helping us to achieve what we consider is that best asset possible, which is safe and sustainable. So my hope that we give to the world of designers is not just to be free to innovate and break that rule book up a little, but we should be challenging them to do so.
That's great to hear, Martin. It's something that's an approach we certainly take, especially when it comes, like you say, to the new innovative products and where we want to actually get them out into that supply chain. Sanyala, did you have anything additional to add from a National Highways perspective?
I think only, and I hear it time and time again, is that we are not involved early enough from our supply chain with the designer. So I think for me, the ask is really around, we need to get the designer, installers, manufacturers, people like you, Emma, Tarmac, your product. Where's the waste, where the where you can help improve the process. But if you're not involved at the beginning, it's too late to influence by the time it comes down to you. So I think for me, I hear it time and time again, how do we get the manufacturer, those in tier 2, tier 3, and even I think for me it's the SME, those guys to involve right at beginning, and how can we left shift. And again, Malcolm there, our exec director, commercial procurement, always talking about left shifting, how can we left shift? And I think if we move together, having that collaboration and bring our tier 2, 3, and 4 together right at the front, I think we make the change a lot quicker.
Yes.
I think that's the only thing I want to add.
Thank you for that. And certainly I would comment that we do a lot of, I would count carbon counting. We produce thousands of carbon footprints at Tarmac, and the majority of them, sadly, are produced retrospectively, just to back up a bit of contract management or something. And actually, as you said, Sanyala, being engaged up front, we can always save more carbon than being brought in at the end or just providing a footprint at the end of a project. So yeah, there's so many levers that we can play with to help to get to that net zero target. Leading on from that question, what do you think suppliers and contractors could do to assist in this and help to overcome some of the barriers to net zero? Sanyala, your thoughts on this?
Yes, so we have been engaged with many organizations, and what we have noticed is that many companies are targeting net zero by 2040, but we want to set a faster pace. We are targeting 2040, so we have we have to direct lever through our contract. So if your 2045 is too late, you want to work with us, you've got to be able to meet, to move at the pace that we are going. But we recognize that we need to work in partnership. That is absolutely key for us. And, we want to make sure that we work together with supply chain and incentivize the right decision, whether through our, contractual commercial model. I think the supplier need to think what we must do differently to address net zero challenges. I think Martin covered right at the beginning of our conversation. We need to make that step change in terms of productivity and digital area. So coming from a different sector, there are certain equipment that we use in this sector that, like 30 plus years equipment. Why? Like where other sector are not doing that, other sector is moving faster than us. So I suppose this is how do we as a sector work together to become more innovative and do things differently. We can't and also don't think it's 2030 or 2040 we can wait. We got to start doing something now. I mentioned about fossil fuel earlier. It's 2030 target, but the standard will need to change by 2025 because that investment need to happen by the time it hit 2030. We need to have all of this equipment ready. So it's got to be now. You can't wait. So if you don't have a plan as a supplier, I encourage you to developing that plan and make sure it's aligned with our target, because if you're not, there's less likely that you'll be working with us, I think, to put it bluntly. But also, I think what we're doing as well to support organization that maybe still new, still thinking about it, we have training course through Supply Chain Sustainability School as well for any procurement, any professional who want to understand the key principle of sustainability procurement, want to drive a better outcome. So there's training course available as well through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. Yes, I think training is an incredibly important point that we haven't covered yet, isn't it, Martin? And helping the supply chain to upskill. Do you think there's anything else that contractors and suppliers can do to assist?
Yeah, I mean, this whole agenda for us, we've got to go on this journey together, really. It's no good that, an organisation claiming it is way out in front of everybody else. We all need to be going, just like Sanyalax says, at the same pace. Otherwise, we're doomed. I think events, like this today are enormously helpful. It's creating that forum for us to have these discussions and present challenges and identify certain solutions. But we know that alone things like this are not enough. We spend a whopping, is it 5 billion a year on local roads, and they affect every single person here in Britain. And I think despite the problems that we have with our networks, we're the envy of the rest of the world. We are the envy of the rest of the world with our road network system. And I for one, living here and working on our road network system, I feel really quite proud of that. I think that we have a chance of leading the rest of the world into the new era. I'll say the new era is a comprehensively integrated, sustainable asset management system. But you know what? I honestly don't think that we'll get there waiting for councils and for national highways to specify exactly what they require. I think identifying the outcomes should be sufficient from that client perspective. I'd then be saying, right, now step up to the plate. Contractors, consultants, suppliers, understand what it means to better meet the needs of our customers and our clients. So those are things we should be doing. I'd like to share with you one thing we shouldn't be doing, and I'm witnessing it already on I won't say a frequent basis, but I've witnessed it more than once, let's say, and I'll call it greenwashing. So I'm having something presented to me and they're trying to sell me the dream that this is the sustainable future, and it's not. So if we avoid the greenwashing and we do some of those things I've mentioned just there, you know what, we will lead the world and we will be first to arrive at that new and better and needed solution.
Thanks, Martin. And then obviously UK government and Wales and Scotland, we were all first in leading and setting those net zero by 2050 targets. And you're right, it is something to incredibly be proud of. Alex, did you have anything additional to add to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can be as inspiring as Martin's talked about, but yeah, two things. One more high level, one more specific. I think on the high level aspects of it, in terms of barriers, if suppliers are identifying barriers, please speak to us. We talked about early engagement earlier, but let us know what they are as early as possible. We want dialogue around what some of these things are. You know, we don't know exactly perfectly how to reach net zero 50, otherwise we would have done it already. I think, you know, if there are like I've talked a lot about collaboration, and we really want to emphasize that if there's a reason why you don't feel comfortable sharing your barriers, if you're worried about your intellectual property being affected or something like that, we want to be in a position where we can discuss these things more openly. I guess a more specific ask would be, we've spoken a little bit about whole life cost assessments, and for DFT, like I've said, that's going to be PAS 2080. A lot of what we're hearing, and understandably, but a lot of what we're hearing from suppliers is we've not got the capability to do that yet. We're working towards getting there, but it's going to take us a while before we could submit whole life cost assessments with bids. I mean, anything that people can do to kind of hurry up that journey of getting that capability, because I think we've spoke about how important the idea of whole life cost and being able to benchmark against that is going to be on this journey. So yeah, those are my two things.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all three of you for your input today. I think we could probably talk all afternoon about this, couldn't we? So just to finish up, is there anything else you'd like to add on this topic?
Can I, if you don't mind, I would like to say, I'm going to go back to where I started, which was with LCRIG and saying what we're built upon. We're built upon innovation, collaboration and net zero. That's the three pillars of this business. That's what we're focused on. That's what we're pushing going forward. I honestly believe that each one of those will play their equal part in delivering what we need, you know, which is that sustainable, integrated asset management system that will once again, be the envy of the world.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you for your input today, and thank you for joining us at the Tarmac Building Sustainability event.